I don't recommend Gen 2 night vision even if you're on a budget. There's really no such thing as cheap analog night vision, and the cheapest out there is Gen 2 or 2 Plus stuff from various foreign entities. But I don't think the meager cost savings makes up for a reduction in the performance and durability. Now, full disclosure on this is one of the last things I received from a company, though not from the manufacturer. This is actually sent to me by Optics Force, which is one of the 2 affiliate links that I have left, only because I haven't gotten this review out yet, even though I've had it for almost a year now. Now, talking about the unit briefly, this is the AGM PVS14 knockoff with a Gen 2 Plus white phosphorus intensifier tube. Now, when I received the unit last year, it was valued around 2K, but at the time of recording this video now, almost a year later, it's gone to 2.5 to 3K from various retailers, which, if you look around, is touching the low-end Gen 3 units price range, which completely negates these units' existence in the first place. Now, everything on the AGM unit is worse than a mil-spec PVS14. Up front, the glass is worse than mil-spec Carson glass, which leads to a worse overall image, worse halo effects around bright lights, more distortion, etc. When compared to a couple of Gen 3 units that were sent out by noise fighters to play around with for a little while, the difference is very noticeable. The AGM unit does have a bright light cutoff and manual gain, which will be on maximum most of the time so that you can see anything. The power comes from a single AA battery, and the battery life is fortunately really good. Now, at the back of the unit, we also have a smaller objective lens, which means that the image presented is much smaller. That means that you have to adjust the unit much closer to your eyes to get the same image when compared to a mil-spec housing. This can be problematic for your specific setup depending on your helmet, your mount, and if you want to use eye protection or not. Another thing that I have to say, even with the mil-spec housing, is how cheap and garbage the whole thing feels for a insane cost. The front focus ring is sticky and feels like rubbing 2 chickens together to get your image to look clear, which is not what you're supposed to do with those. Weight on the unit is okay, I think they're around 12 ounces or so, and overall the whole thing just feels very cheap and chintzy for, again, is now nearly $3,000 for a brand new old unit with a 2 Plus white phosphorus image intensifier tube. And again, overall the thing just feels very cheap and chintzy for what is a very extreme cost, nearly $3,000 nowadays, which is quite ridiculous in my opinion. Now, that's all well and good, but that's not really what you're buying it for. In this case, you're buying it because it's white phosphorus, which looks good on paper, I guess, and it's inexpensive for what it is, but the actual performance of all analog night vision is, in my opinion, really mediocre. Now, something that I do want to say is I've heard a lot of wacky things said about night vision, like, it's such an amazing experience, you look up at the stars and it's beautiful, and it looks like you're looking at stars through a fuzzy little tube. And that's with Gen 3 or with 2 Plus. It's not a superpower. It's like, hey, congratulations, you can see 10% better in the dark, and you have to use supporting equipment to get it to that point. It's not very impressive. Truly, it's obviously very useful in certain circumstances and a game changer if you're up against a force that doesn't have any, of course. But in terms of like a superpower performance, it's very, very mediocre. It's like, congratulations, you can see a little better in the dark and now your head hurts. It's nothing. Night vision performance to me just isn't particularly impressive. The cool factor wears off in about 3 minutes. It ruins every rifle that you own. And, you know, the people peddling it to you, like, if you don't have this, you're gonna get literally killed in the streets tomorrow. Usually they have an affiliate link for some company, or they're trying to sell you 2 Plus tubes to move stock rather than Gen 3s, but that's another discussion for somebody else. Now, why, in my opinion, should you not waste your time or money with a Gen 2 Plus tube? And that is simply because the cost is already very high, so that the cost delta between something like a Gen 2 Plus and a low-end Gen 3 tube is very minimal. Very minimal. It's like 20%, 25%, which might be hundreds of dollars, of course, but the performance increase is almost proportional with the price increase. Whereas, let's say with a rifle or something, right? If you go from $1,500 for a Geisley and then to $3,000 to a CAC, well, you lost performance, or in some cases you gained 1.5 2 points of performance or something like that. There's very little price to performance ratio past a certain point. But with night vision, if you have a better housing, better glass, better objective, better intensifier tube, well then something like this, which is pretty mediocre to a Gen 3, sure, it might be 25, 30, 45% more expensive, but you're getting not a proportional, but closer proportional jump in performance with better glass, meaning that you get less halo effect, sometimes you get a lighter weight housing, which is very important for being out in the night for 6, 7, 8 hours at a time. That extra weight will absolutely kill you, especially in the long run. You get a better intensifier tube, you get a better objective, just everything about the unit is nicer. So a Gen 2 Plus tube with a crappy housing might seem like it's saving you some money, but you're really just cutting down your performance a good bit from already unimpressive performance. Like even the best Gen 3 high FOM tube is like kind of mediocre to look through. Like it's not as impressive as people make it out to be. It's fine, it works okay if you can join it with really high-end other equipment. It can be a pleasant, fun experience. And again, usually those people saying you must buy now, buy, usually are attached with an affiliate link or direct sales where there's some sort of weird coping thing happening there. Another reason why you probably don't want to mess around with Gen 2 Plus, in my opinion, is the intensifier tubes are not as durable as Gen 3 units. So for instance, this Gen 2 Plus, a very funny story, about a couple days after I received the unit, my son was playing around with it, and he left it somewhere for a couple of hours, and I was not paying as much attention as I should, and I come back to the unit, and my son had left it in front of some light source, and it completely blemmed out the tube a couple days after I received it. So, big bummer. Now, the blems that it have are really annoying, especially if you look at them, but you can still just look past them and target focus. It's not that big of a deal. It's perhaps not as big of a deal as it looks on camera, but if you sit there and stare at them, there are some quite annoying blems in the actual housing. The unit as it shipped to me from Optics Force was in good shape. There was very little artifacts or anything in there. It was a very clean tube. The main issue with the unit is that, again, the glass, the housing, it's all pretty subpar. Now you could take this out, take the image intensifier tube out and put it in something else that's nicer, but then you just spent even more money on a crappy tube when you could have bought a better tube with a better housing to start. So again, this is like a entry-level unit. You could probably still find these used for $2,000 or under. I might even end up selling this for a very low dollar amount, hopefully. You can probably find something like that that's quote-unquote entry-level, but you're still spending thousands of dollars to get subpar performance out of something where there's not a lot of room to mess around with, in my opinion. Like, everything is based off of your tube, your passive aiming, your active aiming. Everything that you do when you're walking around the woods under nods is built off of this. So if there's one thing that you should not cheap out on, it's this. If you're going to spend $4,000 on a mall or whatever it happens to be, but cheap out on your tubes, well, you should buy the best tube you can, because that's going to affect the performance of everything else that you use, and you should save money and buy a Holosun Iris, or even cheap out and go with the SMS version, or, there's a few other cheaper models floating around out there. So if there's one area to cheap out in, it is not the tube, because the tube is it dictates the performance of everything else that you use. And this is the one area in the gun industry where there is almost a proportional performance increase per dollar spent. So would you rather have this, which is quote-unquote like a new unit, or a 20-year-old Gen 3 tube in decent condition? You should buy the 20-year-old Gen 3 tube, especially if it's price competitive. The durability increase, the increase in all the other specs that are actually important versus just age, FOM, SNR, all the other things that you guys like to talk about, because you guys are nerds. I'm not nerds about night vision. I have to use it for certain things, and other than that, I don't particularly enjoy it. The only times that these would make sense is a long time ago when they were like $1,000 a pop, right? And so there's a big price delta between these and an actual unit that's going to give you better performance. But the price is like, here's a good tube and here's a really bad tube. It's like, sure, it's an extra $500, $600, $700, but in terms of the price to performance ratio, it's worth it. It's one of the few upgrades that's actually worth it, right? For almost everything else, it's not worth it to go from a $600 handgun to a $1,200 handgun, like almost ever, right? But that price delta on a image intensifier tube, plus the housing and glass, all that important stuff, that might actually be worth it in some cases. But that's my piece on the AGM PVS14 knockoff, and really any 2+ unit with a mediocre housing and glass. if it's not a insane reduction in price, it's really not worth it. So with all that out of the way, guys, thank you so much for watching. I hope you all enjoyed. Let me know what you think of the AGM PVS14 or any cheap night vision, or your recommendations, more importantly, in the comments down below. And with all that out of the way, thank you so much for watching. I hope you all enjoyed. I will see you in the next one. God bless.